Go ahead and get us started. I'm sure some more people will kind of trickle through as we get going. But good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and welcome to the Carolina Community Coalition Research Series. Each month, we host speakers to share their research, programs, or initiatives on different topics that have been coming up across campus. And over the past few months, gambling or sports betting has been coming up more and more. We've been getting emails to our office from everyone, and it's great to see people who have reached out on the call today to kind of learn more. We have Dr. Shapiro joining us today to talk about kind of this cultural shift that we've seen towards sports gambling and the broader impact that this has had on sports and on society as a whole. So we really appreciate everyone being here today, and hopefully everyone will be able to leave with kind of a better understanding of this issue and some ideas for how we can talk about it with students. But I'm happy to introduce Stephen Shapiro, Chair and Professor in the David and Nicole Tepper Department of Sport and Entertainment Management here at USC. Dr. Shapiro's line of research focuses on sport consumer behavior, ticket pricing, and sports gambling. He has published articles in leading sport management journals, including the Journal of Sport Management, Sport Management Review, and European Sport Management Quarterly. He has authored or co-authored chapters in 8 sport management textbooks. Stephen, we really appreciate you giving us some time today, and I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Jenna. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody. I think this is great, the fact that you do these monthly research and monthly initiatives with issues that arise on campus that would be of interest. I certainly think sports gambling, falls in that category. So happy to be here, happy to share a little bit of what I do. One thing I'll say is what I won't be presenting just my research specifically. I want to talk in general about sport gambling trends. I'll interweave some of my research, but I want to just cover kind of where we're at with sport gambling, how it's grown within the U.S. and its impacts, both uh, more broadly and then on campus in terms of college students. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes, that's coming through.
Okay, good. All right, so I titled this "The Rise of Sports Gambling in America" because I want to give, again, like I said, an overview of where we're at, trends within sport gambling, both its impact from an applied perspective and then the research impact. And it certainly has grown significantly, which we'll get into, but it brings up some issues that certainly should be addressed. A little background on myself before I go into specifics on sport gambling. I have a PhD in sport management. I've been here at the University of South Carolina for 8 years. I'm the chair and professor of David and Nicole Tepper Department of Sport and Entertainment Management. So we certainly cover all aspects of the business of sport, and sport gambling falls in that category. My research area is really more broadly sport marketing and consumer behavior. But within that realm of sport marketing and consumer behavior, I look at sport gambling, its impact on sport consumers, and its impact more globally on the industry. And I also focus in some other areas that I put on here: sport consumer behavior in general, and then pricing and its impact on sport consumers. Today, I want to cover a broad set of topics within sport gambling, provide an overview, kind of talk a little bit about the history and where we're at in terms of sport gambling and its impact on the sport industry, but more generally on the population. How there's been significant industry advancements, and really one of the big tools that we've seen in terms of marketing these tools, these platforms of sport gambling to a greater audience, particularly the age of college students. That's also brought up significant threats. And there's a big impact in terms of sport consumption. So one of the things that we see is the sport fan is changing due to technology, but also due to how they consume sport, and sport gambling is one of those areas. We'll also talk a little bit about research, the research I've done and the research more broadly on sport gambling and sport consumer behavior and what that might mean for the future. So I want to talk real quickly about a story that I think kind of sets the stage for sport gambling. This was not this past playoffs in the NFL, but previously last year, the Chiefs made a run to the Super Bowl. And during that run, there was a game where the Chiefs were favored to win the game by 9.5 points. And towards the end of the game, in an effort to kind of seal their victory, the Chiefs purposely ran out of their own end zone to get a safety that would prevent the opposing team from having a chance to score and win the game. But by doing that, an 11-point lead went to a 9-point lead. So in a 9.5 point spread, that was a big deal in the sport gambling world. From the actual football world and NFL world, it was a smart move by the Kansas City Chiefs, allowed them to secure the victory. But that didn't come off well when we went to the general public, particularly on social media. So these were just some of the tweets that came out after that game, where you can see here a lot of aggressive behavior towards what happened. The Chiefs proved that the NFL is rigged. Why would they give the Texans a safety? The spread is not 9, and now I lose. You can't convince me that it wasn't fixed. Late money on the line changed it. The NFL is a joke. Andy Reid, who's the coach of the Chiefs, doesn't realize this. How could he do this to people? There was a lot of aggression and aggressiveness. And what's really interesting about this is this had nothing to do with the outcome of the game. The Chiefs, in fact, again, strategically, it was the right thing to do for them to limit the chances of the Texans being able to come back. But for people that had money on the game, this was a big issue. They went from potentially winning a bet to now losing a bet because of a decision by a team. And we've seen this in significant numbers over the years since sport gambling has been allowed to be legalized across states within the US, where there's a lot of aggression towards athletes and a lot of anger based on betting, which may or may not have a correlation with what actually happens on the field, whether a team wins or loses. So where did this start? Well, for a long time, sport gambling was illegal in the United States, except for within a couple of places, mainly Las Vegas. If you wanted to bet, you had to go to a casino in Las Vegas, to a sports book, and place a bet legally. There was a lot of illegal gambling going on, but legally, it was restricted to very few places until 2018. In 2018, the Supreme Court overturned a law that had been called the Amateur Sportsman Protection Act of 1992 that had been in place for decades, basically stating that states weren't allowed to legalize gambling. The Supreme Court overturned it, allowed states to make the decision, and immediately states started legalizing gambling and sports gambling in some form. So within 1 year, 9 states had legalized the activity, and that had a big impact. That growth continued. It continues today. Here's a current landscape of sports betting. 39 states have legalized sports gambling in some shape or form. Actually, 40 states. Missouri, at the time that I did this graph, which was late in the fall, Missouri was in the process of legalizing it. Now they have. So 40 states. And then there's a few states that are in the process of legislation, including South Carolina, to legalize. So I would say within the next 5 years, almost all states will have some form of legalized sport gambling. And this has all happened since 2018. So we're talking about under a decade. The numbers are staggering. So you've got $160 billion wagered in 2025 alone. So significant amount of bets being put down. That's an 8.1% increase. So there's a regular increase every year, and mainly that's because more states are legalizing sport gambling. But there's a push to legalize the activity across the country, and therefore it leads to more wagers being placed. Just to give you an example, Super Bowl Sunday is coming up in a few days. $1.76 billion is estimated to be wagered on Super Bowl 60. So That just gives you an idea in one event. And of course, it's the major, biggest event within the United States in sport, but still, to almost have $2 billion wagered just shows you how big sports betting has grown in the United States. Revenues increased about 25% to $13.7 billion dollars. As you can see on the right, that leads to a lot of revenue generated by states and therefore a lot of tax revenue generated by states. And then sports books have won about 9.3% of the wagers. If you look on the right of this screen, you'll see a hold column. Hold means that's how much the sports book is winning. And so you can see all these percentages are 7, 8, 9, 10%. So if that doesn't tell you that the house wins, I don't know what will. So the more you bet, the more likely the house is going to get your money. So that gives you an idea of the amount of money, which is massive in terms of sport gambling, and the amount of interest. Although this is very well supported and popularized now, sport gambling in the United States wasn't really accepted. It was always available illegally, but it wasn't really accepted and promoted. That's been a real change of culture since 2018. In fact, if you look before 2018, there was a significant reluctance by sport organizations and leagues to have anything to do with gambling. They looked at it as an issue with integrity of the game. So if there's gambling involved, people are going to shave points, fix games, and we've seen some of that recently. But it's going to mess with the integrity of the game, and that's the foundation of sport. If people don't think that the outcomes are uncertain, if they think it's fixed, they're less likely to pay attention. You also have reputation and public perception. So gambling was looked at as a seedy type of organization and or activity, and therefore leagues and teams who are legitimate did not want to be associated with it. There's a lot of regulatory and legal risks still to this day. Not everybody's on the same page in terms of legalization of sport gambling. And even if they legalize it, they have different avenues in which it's regulated. And then financial uncertainty. League teams and leagues didn't know what impact it was going to have on their finances, which is really the bottom line. Then after 2018, we moved into this period of acceptance. States started to legalize the activity. There was an economic reality. A lot of people like to wager on sport. It's a popular activity. And the more people that wager on sport, the more people pay attention to sport. And so that was great for teams and leagues. They get more eyeballs on games. They get more people paying attention, buying merchandise, going to games, consuming online. All of those things were benefits to sport organizations, teams, and leagues. And then we gradually saw a shift in public sentiment from looking at sport gambling as a seedy activity to an entertainment activity. And so this period of time allowed sport gambling platforms to integrate themselves into sport organizations in the form of sponsorships, in the form of endorsements with athletes, really legitimizing sport gambling. We're now in what I call the third state, which is evangelism. So it's beyond just acceptance. Sport organizations have fully embraced sport gambling. They see it as an opportunity to make more money. States every year, more and more states are legalizing the activity. Most of the wagers are happening online, which provides even a wider range of opportunity to get more people involved because you're not limited by those in a stadium. And then we're seeing integration with the media, where companies like ESPN are licensing their own betting platforms and talking about having shows that are specifically related to betting. And all of this is opportunity. So now we see sport organizations not only accepting it, but getting on a pedestal and advocating for the benefit of sport gambling. You can see this in these major deals. There's huge sponsorship and media rights deals with Caesars, DraftKings, and FanDuel. Leagues sell real-time data to these platforms so that they can update their spreads in real time, which we'll talk about in a second. It provides a great second screen experience. So I can watch a game on my main screen and then be betting on DraftKings or FanDuel's app in real time at the same time, really further integrating my experience. And then finally, things like fantasy sports have blown up. Fantasy sports has always been popular, but now we have daily fantasy sports, which allows you to essentially be gambling on a daily basis instead of being in your friends or family's league, or in addition to doing that. And so fantasy sports has exploded through legalized gambling. And we see leagues advocating and promoting opportunities to be involved with sport betting. So why do it? I think there's a number of reasons that teams and leagues evangelize. One is partnerships. There's money to be had by sport organizations sponsoring, having sponsorships with these platforms, and these platforms have made billions of dollars. It increases viewership, it increases interest, it increases connection. There's also been in-stadium betting lounges and sports books, so it enhances the experience when you're at a game to be able to be in a sports book atmosphere like you are in Las Vegas, but also be at a game watching the game in person. States have jumped on board because there's significant revenue. We're talking about millions, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars coming in for states, and they can use that revenue for anything they see fit. And then there's this argument of reducing illegal gambling. So a great example is here in South Carolina, our governor's been very reluctant to embrace sport gambling, and therefore it hasn't really passed our legislature. It's been brought up as a bill a few times, but hasn't really gone anywhere. And one argument on the pro side of why we should legalize it is there's a lot of illegal gambling going on in South Carolina. A lot of people are placing bets, and in an unregulated environment, it may not be safe. Meaning, if you're betting with a bookie and you don't pay your debts, could you get hurt from it? Even if you are betting with a overseas platform, are they even going to pay you your winnings? If it's not regulated, there's no safety, there's no consumer protection. So the argument is this: if you legalize gambling, it would take away this illegal gambling environment. Well, that's still up for debate. The research hasn't shown clearly in states that have legalized that illegal gambling has gone away. It's in the shadows, so it's hard to know the exact dollars. But even in states where they've legalized gambling, illegal gambling still exists. So I want to, before I jump into the research, I just want to talk about where the industry's gone. For those that haven't gambled on sport or bet on it, don't know much about it, there's four major players, DraftKings and FanDuel, who are traditionally fantasy sport platforms. But when sport in 2018, when sport gambling was allowed across states, they became big players in sport gambling. And then your traditional large sport or gambling platforms like MGM and Caesars are two of the other big platforms for sport gambling. Really, what's changed is gambling's always been around. And when it was legal, let's say just in Las Vegas, it was restricted to having to go to a specific casino, place a bet. Usually you had to put cash down to be able to do that. You may stay there and watch the game. You win, you pick up your money, you lose, you go home upset. But it existed. But there was a lot of barriers to be able to do it. One, you had to go to Las Vegas. So if you didn't live there, you got to go to Las Vegas, make a trip. You had to go to the sports book. You had to place a bet in person. You had to have cash. All these things were made it more restrictive. The boom in the industry post 2018, along with advancements in technology, has removed those barriers. Now I don't have to be in Las Vegas. I can be in any of the states where it's legal. Now I don't have to be at a sports book or at the game. I can be on my couch on FanDuel, on DraftKings or FanDuel or MGM's app. Now I don't have to have actual cash. I can just have an account, and that account can seem to me like it's not even real money, and spend that. In fact, a lot of these platforms give promotional signups. So you get $200 in free bets when you first register. Great, free money. All of a sudden you're betting. It doesn't feel like money. So all these things have really changed the industry to make it more popular, but also to create an environment that could potentially cause some threats and challenges. Other advancements that I show you here make it even more enticing and even more challenging. So um, before 2018 and before mobile betting, you didn't bet in game. You bet on a game, just like the Super Bowl coming up. You bet on the Patriots are going to win. You bet on the Seahawks are going to win. You watch the game after it's over, you won the bet or lost the bet. Now we have in-game betting. So that same scenario with the Super Bowl coming up, where I would bet one time on a game, now I can bet almost an infinite amount of times, but certainly dozens and dozens of times. I can bet on players and what how and their performance. I can bet on what's going to happen on a in an individual quarter, what the score is going to be at halftime. I can bet on whether a player is going to score a touchdown for the game or in a particular quarter of the game. And with the Super Bowl, you have prop bets that even take it further. I can bet on who's going to win the coin toss. I can bet on how many times or if the person that's doing the national anthem is going to mess up. I can bet on how much time the halftime show is going to take. So there's all types of interesting bets that basically make an infinite amount of opportunities to place a wager. And that changes things dramatically. Now, you might say, for one on the pro side, for entertainment, it makes it a more fun environment. But on the negative side, gambling addiction and people not understanding the impact of those wagers can be a problem. You also have things like early cash out. You're able to not even wait until this particular event has occurred. You can set for instance, as an example of a parlay. A parlay is a multiple bet wager that you're putting where multiple things have to happen for you to win. So it might be the Seahawks are going to win. This particular player is going to score a touchdown. It's going to be this score at halftime. The coin toss is going to be heads or tails. And if I get all four or five of those things right, I get a huge payout. But of course, the odds of all those things happening become very difficult. If you get some of those things right, you could actually cash out and win some of your money. So that adds another layer. And then, of course, AI affects all aspects of our lives now, and sport gambling is no different. We see AI in efforts to improve gambling, to create odds for platforms, to improve gamblers' opportunities to win bets. It's certainly integrating the industry. So these are all advancements that have really changed how we look at sport gambling. Another thing that I think is really important to focus on is marketing strategies. So who are sport gambling platforms going after? Mainly the college student age, 16 to 30 years old, mostly males, high sports engagement, people that are tech savvy, people that have played fantasy before. Why are they going after that group? You have a young audience that is mostly risk tolerant. They're willing to take risks. They may not understand money as much as when they would get older. It's their prime time of watching sports. You have more time to consume sport than you might when you get older and have a job or have a family. It's a betting culture. It's always been college aged students have always been on sport, even though it was illegal in a lot of places. Now it's very easy if you're tech savvy. Very easy. Download any of these apps. You can be betting in seconds. And then, as I mentioned, limited financial background. What makes sport betting especially unique is this idea of illusion of control. And so I think in any type of gambling, you can have people that think that they have some kind of advantage because they have skill, poker, blackjack, all kinds of table games within casinos that a player thinks they have knowledge. And in some cases, they do. They have some skill that helps them. Sports probably enhances that more than anything else. Sport bettors think that because they're sport fans, and they watch games and they know the players and they listen to the news and they study up, that they know more than the house. And so it creates this overconfidence that this isn't a luck scenario. This is skill. And if I'm skillful enough, I can win. When the reality is the odds are set to prevent that. But there's an illusion of this control over my knowledge and ability helping me win bets. And so that creates an environment that can be particularly dangerous. Um, so how do they do this? Well, sport gambling platforms, if you haven't seen it and don't watch sport, you might not be aware of it, but they are very good at marketing this audience. They integrate themselves with aggressive acquisition. They do a lot of promotions. They hit the right places where younger college age students would be paying attention. They target that audience. They use celebrities. They use athletes to be able to familiarize themselves. You can see an example of this with the Mannings and the FanDuel Kick of Destiny, where they had kind of a both Manning brothers trying to kick a field goal, but FanDuel sponsoring it as part of the Super Bowl. And they're doing this in all different places, social media, digital media, in the stadiums, different media integration and partnerships. They're hitting the places where this age group is more likely to consume sport. And so, what does that lead to? And I think this is kind of the key thing I want to hit on. I wanted to give some background, but the key thing I want to hit on that I think is helpful to this audience, certainly there can be increases in gambling addiction. So the more people bet, the bigger the population, the more likely a percentage of those people are going to have gambling addiction and problem gambling. And that can lead to significant problems, not only financially, but emotionally. It can also lead to aggressive behavior. There's all different factors that are negative that come along with gambling addiction. So there's this argument of gambling being legalized for entertainment purposes versus the potential negatives with gambling addiction. And then there's not really a target on who's to blame. Is it the individual person that gets out of control with their betting? Is it the industry that promotes it and markets to a younger audience? Is it government because government's taking advantage of tax revenue? All of this is kind of in play. But the fact is, it is a legitimate threat, and that threat is heightened for those college age in that market. Um, Another thing is there's big marketing effectiveness. Uh, DraftTool and FanDuel and DraftKings and MGM and Caesars have had a lot of success in revenue by getting people in, and then the acquisition costs go down once someone's has the app and they've started to bet. It becomes easy for them, and now it's easier to acquire to get them to bet more and to acquire new people. As I mentioned before, there's reduced barriers to entry. It's very easy to download the app in a state that's legal and start betting. In fact, you don't have to have a lot of knowledge about it. They make it very easy for you to do it. And then, of course, integrity of the game. We've seen recent examples of athletes being caught shaving points both at the college and professional level. Not only shaving points, it's become really challenging. A great example is two pitchers in Major League Baseball were caught and banned for not necessarily blowing a game, but for just throwing a ball at a certain time and a count. Because again, these real-time in-game betting, you're allowed to bet on whether the next pitch is going to be a ball or strike. And so a pitcher could purposely throw a ball. It doesn't have a huge effect on the game. They might end up getting that batter out. But in that one pitch, they throw a ball on purpose. There's a large wager on that, knowing that the person purposely threw a ball, and you have an integrity of the game issue. So I think integrity of the game is a big threat. We also have media integration. So ESPN is a great example. ESPN, although their license with BetESPN and Penn Gaming is stopped in November, but they were a great example. ESPN is a huge media company. They have journalism. They cover sports, but they also promote betting. And so you have this kind of in between of or conflict of covering sports and perhaps the negative components of gambling and then promoting gambling. And that conflict is real. You also have dehumanization. The Patrick Mahomes example that I gave you, running for going in the end zone for a safety, and athletes being aggressively accused of not coming through and losing bets, creates this dehumanization where players aren't looked at as real people. They're just tools to win money. And you start to see more aggressive behavior towards them, particularly on social media, because there's a direct way to communicate with these athletes. It's not through the media. So I think that's a big issue. And then leading into my research, this topic of fan erosion, which means this is a potential threat where people that bet on sports, traditionally sport fans were fans of teams and they watched games to see if their team won or lost. But sport betting isn't really about a team necessarily winning or losing. It's about a point spread. It's about an individual player performing. And so over time, would sport gamblers not be as interested in their favorite teams and watching a game in a traditional form? Maybe they want to watch a bunch of different games and a bunch of different players, which on the surface seems great for teams and leagues. That's more consumption. But over time, do you lose that fan loyalty and that conviction fans have to show up even when their team's not doing well. I mean, you look at our football team this year didn't have a great year, a year that they wanted to, but fans still showed up and showed out, and that stadium was full even though we were losing. And you could lose some of that if people don't care about a favorite team; they just care about a bet. It's possible over time that people won't show up for games. So I think that's a legitimate threat. So that leads into my research. So I do research in consumer behavior focused on sport gambling. So looking at how sport gambling affects the gambler, which affects their sport consumption. And what we've found is it really acts as a complementary activity. So you can't have sport gambling without sport. So individuals are going to watch sport because they bet on sport. In fact, you could argue they're going to watch more sport because they bet on sport. It doesn't substitute for traditional fandom. What we don't know and what we're studying now is the long-term impact. Will somebody who's a fan of a team and starts betting 5 years from now still be as strong of a fan of that team? And that's kind of what we're looking at. But at this point, early short term, there really isn't an impact. People are watching their favorite team and they're also betting on sport. There's also evidence that there could be a loyalty shift, though, where they don't care as much about their favorite team because they're watching multiple teams. And so that's what I'm getting at with the fan erosion idea, where you might not care about the Miami Dolphins or the Gamecocks or whoever because you care about what's happening more broadly. Um, we've also seen significant increases in fan engagement. Gamblers say they consume more when they bet, so certainly there's financial incentives for that. And they're doing it in a more aggressive nature. So they're really consuming at more of a higher level in different ways and forms than someone that doesn't bet. We've seen more media content integrated into sport coverage. So we see shows that are dedicated and YouTube channels and social media accounts that are dedicated not to sport itself, but to gambling in sport, providing information on tools to bet or picks to wager on for this weekend's games. We start to see some evidence of fragments in consumption where you're no longer focused on just watching one game, but you want to watch multiple games. Definitely creates high stress behaviors where people are more aggressive. When money's on the line, it's a stronger feeling than just your favorite team connection. And then negative perceptions of athletes. Like I said, we just finished conducting a study on dehumanization, and we showed some evidence that there is dehumanization occurring where people dehumanize athletes and think of them as tools to win a bet. So where do we go from this? I think there's a few things. One, as I mentioned, that I'm studying is fan erosion. What's the long-term impact? Are people going to consume sport the same way they do? And what's that impact for leagues and teams if people don't care about one team like they have historically? Um, Also, looking at the sport gambling and media integration, how does it affect sport coverage? Is it okay for a organization to have a sport gambling platform or a license with a sport gambling platform, and then also report on a league? Seems like there could be a potential conflict of interest there. One thing I was going to add too is impact on coverage, broadcasting of sport, meaning in a lot of cases, traditional um, consumption is if a game is good or it's a game against two equal opponents, particularly if they're good, you're going to have more people watch. If the game is close, more people are going to watch. But if you have one team really good and one team's really bad and the score is kind of out of hand early on, you lose viewership. But if bets and wagers are placed on what the spread's going to be at the end of the game, or the total points scored at the end of the game, or what a player does at the end of the game is involved, then sport coverage can change. Now you might be covering not just the game with the top two teams, but the game that entices the most wagering. You also have safety and opportunity. It's up to regulators and platforms and states to determine how to regulate. But at the same time, there's a benefit to having more betting because the more betting, the more revenue that platforms make, the more people are watching sport, and the more tax revenue states make. So balancing regulation and consumer protection with the freedom to grow gambling. That leads to economic impact. There's an argument to legalizing sport gambling creates jobs. If DraftKings and FanDuel are allowed in your state, or if there's sport books, people work at those places. It creates jobs, it creates regulation jobs. There's all different opportunities there that could bolster the economy. But the argument is who's really getting the benefit? Is it the individual consumer or resident of the state? Is it just platforms and teams? Is it the state itself? All that is up for debate. Then the last thing I'll touch on, which could be a whole thing in itself, is prediction markets and event contracts. So this is a new thing. I don't know how many people here have heard of Kalshi, but prediction markets have always existed, but now they've stepped into sports with event contracts. And so prediction markets are different from gambling, and that instead of you placing a bet on the house, like a sports book, you're actually buying a future event contract, and you're buying it from somebody else that has it, like trading stocks. And it has a certain price on it, and it's going to pay out whether a team wins or loses, whether a player performs or doesn't perform. And so it acts very much like gambling, but it's not regulated like gambling. It's treated as a future or a derivative. And so it is legal in South Carolina. So you can't bet on sport in South Carolina, um, on FanDuel or DraftKings. If you downloaded the app and tried to go on, and unless you were geolocated here in South Carolina, it's not going to let you do it. But you can go on Kalshi and bet on the Super Bowl through an event contract. So this becomes another significant challenge within the industry. Is our prediction markets gambling? They argue they're not. Other people argue they are. If they are, then they're allowed to kind of circumvent gambling rules if they're not considered gambling, but they operate like gambling. And then we want to look at, from a research perspective, is there a difference? Do people that bet on sport on DraftKings or FanDuel differ from those that use Kalshi and purchase event contracts? Um, all this is kind of really interweaved together to understand a little bit more about where sport gambling is going and its impact on consumers, and really its impact on college age students in terms of their involvement in betting and then the potential issues that come along with it. So that's kind of an overview of where I see sport gambling and the trends, and then my research integrated into it. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about sport gambling, about kind of where it's going, about its impact on college students. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Stephen. And y'all can feel free to unmute or use the chat box. But I can go ahead and get us started. Could you talk a little bit more about AI? I haven't really seen much about that kind of relationship between AI and betting. And is it used by the person betting, and like how accurate is that for
Sure. So it's
users?
used by both sides. It's used
Mm-hmm.
by platforms to help set odds, because sport betting platforms to generate revenue have to be really good at setting odds. The idea behind sport betting is if you get the spread correctly or the money line correct, um, the goal is to have in an individual game, let's say like the Super Bowl, where you've got the Seahawks against the Patriots, that you get even money on both sides. If you get even money on both sides, that the house is going to win because they have what's called a VIG. They're not going to pay out the same amount that you bet. If you bet $50, you're not going to win $50. You're going to win $47. You pay about 3% to be allowed to bet on the house. And so if they have the same amount of people betting on either side, they're going to get 3% from everybody. Artificial intelligence helps them get that number to where it needs to be, arguably more better than humans. On the other side, individuals can use it to enhance their ability to bet, to make the right bets, to have the knowledge. Um, there's no research that I've seen that says it's effective. That people that are using these AI tools are able to win at a better rate. But there's an argument, and they're certainly being promoted in an effort to give an advantage to the sport better.
Thank you. And I see Rebecca put in the chat. The lottery often talks about hotlines and resources when betting becomes problematic. Do these other sports betting sites have similar messaging for those betting?
They do. So they usually promote any gambling hotline within a state that's used for not just sport gambling, but any gambling addiction issue. The other thing they have is what's called responsible gaming tools. So every one of these platforms allows you to read about the potential issues with problem gambling, and then also create settings similar to what we see with social media platforms to restrict your betting. So I can go into DraftKings and say, I want to set a limit on the number of bets that I have and have the platform not let me bet after a certain amount, or I don't want to bet over this amount. And so those responsible gambling tools are available for anyone to use. The problem is they're not promoted and they're not really incentivized. We actually have a study going on right now looking at responsible gambling tools to see if they're used, which most people don't know about. It's like 15% of gamblers use them, so they're not promoted. And then a lot of people that don't use them, and I've heard of it, said, I don't have a gambling problem. Why would I use these responsible gambling tools? And that, in a lot of cases, could be the evidence of having a gambling problem. People that gamble a lot and say that they don't have a problem. And so they haven't been promoted and they haven't really been incentivized. We're looking at an incentive program in our research where somebody, if they use these tools and stick to their limits, maybe offered a gift card to Amazon, a gift card to Starbucks. And the idea behind that is if people were incentivized, would they be more likely to try these tools and then realize, hey, they're effective. They're helping me curtail my betting. But kind of to answer your question, there's information, there's resources, there's phone numbers. States have to do that when they legalize it. They regulate it and set that up. Whether they're being used effectively and whether they're being promoted effectively, I think that's still up for debate.
Morgan Grace asks, my question is more USC specific. Are there resources on campus for students that struggle with gambling or sports betting?
That's a
And
great question. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. Oh, if you have you you can go ahead and start and then I can kind of chime in what
Yeah.
our office offers.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I should be more knowledgeable about what we offer. And I don't. I know in general that we offer resources for people with gambling. Now, sports betting specific, I'm not sure. You might be able to provide some more than I know, Jenna.
Yeah. Our resources are more general. I don't believe that there's any specific gambling or sports betting providers on our campus, but students that are struggling with those issues are welcome to be seen in counseling and psychology services for counseling appointments. Students are also welcome, like our Gamecock recovery program for students in recovery is absolutely open to students who are in recovery from a behavioral addiction like gambling or sports betting as well. And we're just beginning to kind of ask more questions and get a better understanding of this issue on our campus. We do have a program for students that are struggling with alcohol or cannabis use. And we've started screening those students to see if gambling is an issue that they're experiencing as well. But that's not specific for gambling or sports betting.
Yeah, and then one thing I'll note too, and this is pretty common, where a state will say, well, it's not legal here. If we legalized it, then we're going to have more resources. But the fact is, it's happening. I mean, if you did a survey here on campus and college students were honest, there's a lot of gambling, not only illegal gambling going on, but use of prediction markets like Kalshi. So it's happening. And so if it's happening, there's a percentage of people that have problem gambling. So it's a guarantee. So I think sometimes states that don't have legal activities say, well, when we legalize it, then we'll deal with the after effects of that rather than, well, it's happening whether it's legal or not.
I'll say in counseling and psychology services, we've seen an influx in the last probably month or so of folks that are from out of state who are betting large sums of money on sports betting and other things. And when I say large sums, like $20,000, $30,000, and then parents and students are calling and seeking resources. So I'm just interested because we haven't gotten those type of referrals and those type of requests, specifically in such a influx in a while, occasionally a gambling concern here and there, but it's just been interesting. And most of those students are from out of state where betting is legal and is more popular.
Yeah, I could see that a lot where they've probably learned about the activity or participated in it in a legal environment, and then once you're doing it, you want to continue doing it, which could lead to two things: one, doing it illegally with kind of offshore betting or a bookie, or as I said, prediction markets, which are another way around, but can cause the same addiction problems. I mean, Kalshi, you can purchase as many futures as you want, and it can be a significant issue financially.
And as we're kind of talking about this issue on our campus, we are just starting to ask those questions. We added a question about gambling to the required community education. So we ask all students who are incoming before they come to campus and then after they've been here for 6 weeks. It's just like a long survey about a variety of different behaviors. But we asked if they've engaged in gambling or sports betting behaviors, and we listed kind of like a pretty comprehensive list. And it was about 33% of these 18-year-olds that are coming to campus who had engaged in at least one behavior, with poker and sports betting being two of like the top behaviors that they were reporting coming in. But we are looking at adding more questions. We also do the National College Health Assessment, so we're still trying to figure out, what are the best questions to ask. So if anyone has any, particular questions, we're definitely open to that and seeing, how we can get a better perspective of what students are experiencing. Thanks, Dave, for sharing that in the chat. That Loretta hosts a Gambling Anonymous meeting on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. I think Laredac is also like the only local provider that has gambling specific services.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, I think from my as a researcher, but also just in general, kind of paying attention to sport gambling world and its growth, the ease in which you can bet, and the marketing to attract a younger audience is makes it very vulnerable. I mean, it makes people very vulnerable in general. There's just not, as I mentioned in the presentation, there's not a lot of barriers, including, like I said, including the fact that it's illegal in South Carolina is not a huge barrier for people to overcome. So the ease at which you can do it and the amount that you can bet in terms of not only money, but the different types of wagers in real time, just they set up an environment that somebody that might be prone to problem gambling, it's going to be magnified.
What do you think we should expect if gambling is legalized in South Carolina?
Well, the states that have legalized it, there's a huge honeymoon period where there's significant increases in participation. Whether or not that's a big change, because again, it's hard to put a number on how much illegal gambling is going on. But you have that huge honeymoon period, and then at that point, I think a lot of problem gambling issues come to bear because more people are participating. I'm hoping that because I think at some point I would guess that South Carolina will legalize it. I don't know when it will happen, but I would say within the next few years, it'll get more motive. Now that North Carolina has legalized it, you'll see more of a push. But I'm hoping that South Carolina has learned from maybe some of the other states that didn't have as much consumer protection or safety for people that participate and resources for them, that they'll learn from that and kind of set that to begin with. I don't know if that'll happen, but that's what I'm hopeful that each state learns from maybe the mistakes of the previous states, to make a better environment.
I appreciate that optimism.
because it's going to happen. We're going to
Yeah,
legalize it.
I
So
agree.
whether you agree with it or disagree, and people are on different sides of the spectrum, not that I'm placing a bet on this with sport gambling, but I think that you're going to see it get legalized at some point.
hmm Yeah, I agree. And right now, South Carolina does not have like a state-specific hotline or any of those resources. So I do think, that is a positive as well, is that I'm sure once it's legalized, those resources will become available in our state. Any other questions or anything that y'all are hearing on campus from your students about gambling that you'd like to share? Well, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Shapiro, for your time today. This was a really helpful discussion, and I definitely learned a lot, even though I have been learning way too much about gambling over the past 6 months. It's always great to get some new information in there. Next month we'll be continue. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying thank you. Thanks for
Oh,
having me.
yeah. And we would love to hear your research on the prediction markets and everything as that's coming out too, because yeah, I agree. That's a whole other rabbit hole that we could go down. Next month, we will be continuing the conversation that we've been having about bystander intervention. We're going to be hearing from Dr. Roth and Dr. Wu in the College of Social Work. They recently published a study about what's motivating college students to intervene when they are witnessing discrimination. So it'll be kind of a shift in topic, but going back to what we've been talking about previously about bystander intervention and getting a new perspective on that topic. So we hope to see you all there. That will be March 5th at 3:30 p.m. Thanks, Dr. Shapiro, and thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate it.